Hello and welcome to another edition of Dream Talks. Super excited for tonight. I get to introduce a personal friend of mine and a guy that I work with day in and day out. He is known in our circles as the General, and his name is Brigadier General, retired Neil Tully. He is a Green Beret rocket scientist who spent nearly all 30 years of his military career in Special Forces. He was a Green Beret, a graduate of West Point. He rose through the ranks, working on nearly every continent except Antarctica. He culminated his career as the commanding general of the Special Operations Command in Korea. During this time, he also built and launched commercial communications satellites for a prominent defense corporation. So he is literally a Green Beret and a rocket scientist. Early on in his career, and we're going to talk about this, especially during the War on Terror, he recognized the need for spiritual intelligence to aid military intelligence specialists and operators to see around corners. Neil saw that God speaks through dreams, visions, and spiritual gifts, providing actionable intelligence that could be used to advise leaders. He is also the Deputy Director of the Spiritual Intelligence Service. So here is General Neil Tully.
Hey, John.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, it's going great. Thanks for having me on. This has been a long time coming, and I appreciate the opportunity to share a couple stories with you guys.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you on. We spent so much time talking about, spiritual intelligence and dreams, and of course, your military experience, my military experience. Mine was a lot different than you. I was more like the geek squad, and you were like the operators, So
yeah, I was the geek squad on the rocket science ends of things. So I share your geeky thought process.
Hey, you're like a cool geek. You're like a geek that's also a Navy SEAL, but a little bit more because you're a Green Beret, right? Who's better, Navy SEAL or Green Beret?
Well, it depends on. Navy SEALs are amazing in the water. They're physical specimens. I mean, I admire those guys like you wouldn't believe. Green Berets are more, our role is just different. Green Berets are at their core teachers. We teach armies or small groups of people to be larger forces, create a larger force within a country. We have lots of different missions. That's the primary mission a long time ago was to teach. And so that's what we used to do. And there was also, strategic reconnaissance and direct action and those kind of things. But who's the best of all of them? I'll leave that to somebody else to decide. But we admire each other in each service. I'll tell you. In my career, I got a chance to work in joint assignments, which are Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. You get to see all of them, and every single one of them has got a different language. So the challenge was to learn how to talk Navy or Air Force. It's completely different, but each one brings something to the table, and we can't fight wars without each one of them. So no, in my mind, no one's more important than the other. We all got to fit together and work together.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. Now you ended your career as a commanding general of Special Operations Command, SOCOM in Korea. So you commanded Army, Navy, Air Force, all kinds of special forces, didn't you?
Yeah, that was the Special Operations Command Korea had all the branches were supported, including the reserves and the National Guard. Mm-hmm. And it expanded into the international world too. The actual headquarters was the U.S. headquarters, but I wore 3 hats when I was there. One was the commander of the U.S. Special Forces in Korea. Then the second one was I was the deputy commander of the Combined Unconventional Warfare Task Force. It's a mouthful, but it's basically the U.S. and Combined Korean Special Forces. And then the last one was the commander of the UN National or Special Operations Forces. So any nation in the United Nations that signed up to fight the war in Korea, I would technically be their commander. So in time of war, I would command like 32,000 people. In peacetime, it was a whole lot less. I mean, it was a headquarters for planning and staging the initial phases of a potential war, which never came while I was there.
Wow, exciting waters to show. And tell me about this one right here.
That picture was taken in Turkey, in a place called Bolu. We were there on an exercise with the Turkish Special Forces. This was it's called a Joint Combined Exercise for Training course. It wasn't a course; it was an exercise. So it started in the southern part of the United States. The Turkish guys came over, and we trained in Alabama. And then we took, the Air Force tried to fly us over to Turkey and start the exercise over there. And so the culmination of the exercise was in Turkey. This is the final day of the exercise. And the guy with the maroon beret was the Turkish advisor. He was a lieutenant. But that's the team that I commanded, including the Turkish guys. Some of those Turkish folks were just unbelievable warriors. I mean, the guy right in the middle was in the Cypriot Wars, and just an amazing guy, a little crazy, like all of us are, but just an amazing warrior.
Wow. Now here's a fun one.
Yeah, my ninjas. Okay, so this was my last jump that I took in the military. I was on jump status, believe it or not, from 1985 till 2012 without a break. And this was the last jump. The people that I was jumping with were the 707th Special Mission Brigade, and they're the South Korean equivalent of the Delta Force. That's me in the tan jumpsuit with the Cheshire Cat kind of grin on my face. That was just it was a great time. They were so gracious, and it was, that jump was from about 12,000 feet over Seoul, and it was just a beautiful day. Great way to end it.
So being on jump status, how many jumps did you have to do to keep your quals and all of that?
That's a good question. The type of jump that the parachute that you're looking at there is a Halo parachute. That's it's an old one. We use a modification of that today, but that one was one of the first squares that we used. Let's see, it was about a 2-week long qualification every year. It took us an inordinate amount of time to train this particular mission set, based on, and this is just, got to understand, the whole parachute piece is just to get you into the fight. But it took like 70% of our training time to train for it, because it's kind of dangerous a little bit. You're falling from this particular one. What you're looking at, the previous one was in Italy. If you saw that I was wearing a blue suit, that's actually a down suit. So we were jumping from 25,000 feet, and it's pretty cold up at 25,000 feet. So that's right around commercial airliner height. So if next time you're flying around, look out the window. That's about where we jump from. So that picture was taken in northern Italy, and in the same place that my son, I was there as a captain, and my son is now stationed in the same place that I was jumping in that photo.
Wow.
And he's in the Air Force now. So a lot of fun. That one was taken over somewhere in the United States. We were doing a train up, and the sun was just right. I don't remember who took the picture, but it was a nice stack. And that thing dangling from the guy in front is a rucksack. So you carry your rucksack and all your equipment with you, and kind of when you're about to land, you lower that thing on a tethering line, basically, and it drops. It's kind of like becomes a boat anchor, and it makes sure you don't get dragged too far across the drop zone.
Wow. Well, here's a couple more, since we're trying to do a show and tell. What was this actually?
Show and tell. This was taken in, I think it was 2011, in a drop zone in Korea. Let's see, the second to my left. I'm on the far right. Second man from the left is Admiral Olson. He was the commander of the Special Operations Command in MacDill. He's the 4-star admiral in charge of all Special Operations Force in 2011. He was my boss, second boss. And that balloon in the back that you see, there's a gondola that hangs off the bottom of it that we jumped from. So it was the first time that the Admiral had ever jumped from a balloon, and about my 15th jump from one or something like that.
Wow.
But it was a lot of fun. I mean, it's a very quiet jump. Let's put it that way. You don't hear the roar of the engines in a high performance aircraft or a helicopter. You're not getting hit with hydraulic fluid. So interesting way to jump. This was taken the other day in Ukraine.
Exactly.
This one was taken in January of 1984 during an exercise called Reforger. When we were, I don't know if they still do it anymore, but it basically was an exercise for when the Great Horde came across, Europe for the next World War, and the exercise spanned Germany from the western coast or the western border to the eastern border. Took about a month to do it. It was just, January in Germany. It's just cold. It was just a cold exercise. So.
And so this is what you did to keep warm?
Yeah, we did pugil stick training. That was me as a cadet. I don't know if that was actually me as a cadet. I think it was. It's a left-handed pugil sticker. Anyway, yeah, the first time when you're going up against a right-handed person with a pugil stick and you're left-handed, you can always get the first whack in because they don't know how to defend against a left-handed person. Soon after that, they figured out, and quite frankly, I got decked.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, well. This was a mountain climbing exercise that we did in an undisclosed location in Europe. That was the team that I had.
The color of the shutters.
Yeah, we're not supposed to look at those, but I'm sure you can figure it out. Maybe you can't. I don't know. But yeah, we did mountain climbing, glacier climbing, glissading. It was just it was a challenge. It was a lot of fun. We climbed some pretty high mountains during that exercise.
Wow.
Yeah, that was good times.
And then you jumped off of this thing here, right?
Yeah, I jumped off the crane that picture was taken from. This is a picture of Inmarsat Flight 3. This was 1995-ish, taken at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. So that was probably about the sixth satellite that I had built. We flew it over and launched it on a Proton Block DM heavy lift rocket. It's a thing of beauty, I'll tell you. Russians have a very different engineering philosophy than we do. We build pretty expensive and sexy. They just build big, robust, and just functional, Our space program, the first time we spent, I don't know how many millions of dollars to get a pen that would write in space. The Russians used a pencil.
That's so funny.
Yeah. No, it was a lot of fun. That trip was definitely worth it. It was an eye-opener.
Wow. So you've been in every continent except Antarctica.
Yeah, kind of like to go to Antarctica to see what's down there, besides penguins.
Absolutely. I've heard a lot of interesting stories. They just found the Endurance, which we've talked about. It's come up in dreams, and it's so interesting that our whole group started kind of looking at the Endurance, the Shackleton expedition. What was that, 1914, I think? 1915?
It was the teens.
It was when? Yeah,
in the teens.
Right, and their ship gets stuck in the ice and sinks, and they're stuck there literally for 2 years, and they didn't lose a man. They didn't lose one person at all.
That whole expedition is an exercise in leadership. I mean, that it's used in leadership classes as to how to be a good leader. And it wasn't just Shackleton that was a good leader. It was the captain of the ship too. He and fascinating thing, he got on the expedition as a result of a dream. He had a dream that he was in a ship in London, and the ship was going down a street in London, and it stopped at whatever headquarters Shackleton was at. And he was like, well, I guess I'm going there. So he went and talked to Shackleton and said, I want to be on this expedition. He explained to him the dream, and it was like, okay, you're on. And he was responsible for a lot of the decisions, the good decisions that were made that kept everybody alive. Wow. And his navigation from Antarctica to St. George Island, dead reckoning for, I don't know, what was it, 250 or 600 miles? It was some ungodly distance. And it's a wonder, it's a miracle that they didn't all die of frostbite.
Yeah, it's crazy that because the temperatures down there can get like -70, right?
Yeah, yeah. And it was one of my jobs. My first job as a Green Beret was with a group that's mission was winter warfare, and so I spent a lot of time working in the snow. And I understand, even with today's really good equipment, it's not hard to get really, really cold and get into a lot of trouble if you're not trained for it, you're not ready for it. And those guys were just amazing on how they survived. I mean, it really was a testament to the leadership and the Lord for saving them all. I mean, it was amazing.
Wow, that's incredible. So you've lived a pretty interesting life. You've got to travel a lot, do a lot, have a lot of fun.
That is true. You haven't been such a slouch yourself. You know, you spent 11 years in the Navy. You know, most people today know you as the dream guy, but your career goes a whole lot more in depth than anybody realizes. I mean, you spent 11 years in the Navy in the nuke world. You passed the naval nuclear, the nuclear program, which is, I can't imagine how hard that is. I was a nuclear source handler for that defense contractor, but what I was handling was minuscule compared with what you were doing. You've written 2 books. You know, you're a strategist, a financier, you know, a serial entrepreneur, president, CEO, motivational speaker. But most people just know you as the dream guy. And if they took any time to get to know you, they'd realize that you're so much more than that.
Well, thanks, man. It's fun being the dream guy. It's kind of fun when people, don't have any idea where you came from or who you are. And I just get to talk dreams because, it's beautiful when we meet people, as you've seen, well, tell me what dream, 5 minutes in or 2 minutes into a conversation, when you say you interpret dreams, they're like, I've interpreted dreams for people before that they were in tears before I even knew what their name was.
Hmm.
I introduced as, oh, this is a dream guy. Oh, I had a dream. Okay, well, what's your dream? And then they tell me, and I interpret. And the next thing I know, they're crying, and I'm like, excuse me, sir, what was your name?
Lead off with that.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting what we do. So we got hooked up because of an interview that I did on Grace and Glory, what's called His Glory Network, right? And it was with Amanda Grace and Pastor Dave Scarlett, called Wind of the Supernatural. I think that was the first one they ever did, if I remember.
You were the first, second, and third.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think each one was like 3 hours long. I know the very first one was at least 2 hours long, because halfway through it is what caught my attention. It was an hour into it. It was like an hour and 4 into that interview. You were talking about, up to that point, you were talking about just your background and how, dreams are, from the Bible and blah, blah, blah. But you finally got to an hour into it, and you said, and this came to the group you were working with asked a central question. If we really believe that dreams come from God and the interpretation, why isn't there a full-time organization that's giving dream interpretation with national actionable intelligence to the government and leaders of the world? And at that point, I was kind of screaming at the screen saying, this is exactly what I was talking about in 1988. Had no idea what to do with it back then. But I finally saw you talking about, it's like a kindred spirit. And so, back in 1998, I was a Green Beret captain, and Satan likes to kill me every once in a while, or try to kill me every once in a while. And 1998. What's that?
Keeps it interesting.
Yes, it does. And so in 1988, it was no different. So, and he usually does it right around times of spiritual breakthrough. So during that time, December of 1988, I was baptized in the Holy Spirit. And the day that something kind of manifested itself, I had to go brief a guy who was going to take my place in a planning exercise for, it's called Exercise Mufloni over in Italy. Does it once a year. I'd done it 2 years in a row, and this was going to be the third year that I was going to do it. And at the last minute, he was put in my place. And so I had to brief him on the organization, people that he was going to meet, gave him my notebook on all the notes that I was going to take. And it's just like, here, I'm just giving you what you have to do. You don't have to do anything. Just read the notes and fill in the blanks. And we swapped plane tickets and everything.
Mm.
So about a week later, the conference was over, and we get this call, and it said that this captain that I had briefed had boarded Pan Am Flight 103.
Oh, wow.
He perished over Lockerbie, Scotland.
That was the terrorist. Wasn't that Carlos the Jackal?
Yeah, supposedly, yeah.
Pan Am 103 or Lockerbie, Scotland. Yeah, that's one of the better known terrorist actions in the history of terrorism, actually.
Exactly. And I was supposed to be on that flight.
Mm-hmm.
So in that same week, between the time that I talked to him and the time that the crash happened, I'd been just poring over the Old Testament. It was just a time that I was kind of eating the Old Testament. I mean, that's what it felt like. I just couldn't get enough of it. So I was reading. And I came to 2 Kings, and it really struck me. It was the passage about Elisha and the King of Aram. The King of Aram was trying his best to annihilate the Israelites, and especially the king of Israel at the time. Mm-hmm. But at every turn, he was thwarted. Everything he did just didn't work. And so after a while, he got really frustrated, and he called the wise guys in and said, "Who's the traitor in my camp?"
The wise guys.
And one of the wise guys said, "It's really nobody in this camp. There's this guy named Elisha who hears what you are saying as if he is in your bedchamber with you." I thought, why can't we do that?
Uh-huh.
And so with that knowledge, massive knowledge that I had of that one Bible passage, I went in and talked to my battalion intelligence officer. I said, "Tim, look at this passage. It says that, this guy can hear into this enemy camp's. He heard his plans. He heard everything that he was doing before it happened. It's like, we should be able to do this." And he said, "Great, show me something." And I was like, I don't have anything for you. I
have nothing.
All I know is that it says it in here that it can be done. So let's do it. He was like, "Yeah, thanks a lot, Neil. Why don't you come back later when you got something for me?" And kicked me out of his closet. So,
wow.
So 30 years later, 1988 till now, or till last year. Yeah, 25, 30 years, something like that.
Wow.
Finally run into you, and it's like, holy mackerel. I remember, it was just a very visceral understanding, or it wasn't an understanding, but I just knew that it could be done. Mm-hmm. And it's like, but I didn't have a grid for it. I didn't have anybody to lead or guide me. Didn't have anybody that was even interested in pursuing knowing about that in my circle. I'm sure there were in other places, but in mine, not so much.
Yeah, that's so cool. I remember how revelationary it was. I was working with somebody in Hollywood at the time. I was working on a series we wanted to take to Netflix or Amazon, whatever, an incredible series, launched a production company with a well-known friend of mine who's an author and done a whole bunch of other stuff. And she said, "Hey, call this friend in Hollywood that worked for Dick Clark Productions and see if we can work together on a few things." And so I started talking to this lady, knowing not much other than the fact that she worked in the entertainment industry as well. Mm-hmm. And kind of, how you have a conversation and you're kind of like, "Are you a Christian?" It was just kind of, I was like, yes, I am. And so, you kind of dip your toe into the religious or the spiritual conversation. And then we mentioned something about like the prophetic, and come to find out that she had done extensive work with prophetic teams in Hollywood. And I was putting together dream interpretation teams in Florida at the time. And she was like, "Oh man, I need some interpreters for some of the things that we're doing." And I'm like, "Man, I would love to talk to you about what you're doing." And she's like, "Well, let's focus on work and have a separate conversation." And we did. And I think it was the second conversation where she really kind of showed me what she was working on. I showed her what I was working on. Excuse me. And we asked what we've come to know as a central question. If we I know we believe in prophecy. I think most Christians believe that prophecy exists and, God can speak through dreams.
Sure.
but it doesn't guide most people's lives. And I'm like, if we really, really believe this thing, like if we really believe we can hear from God for actionable intelligence and dreams, visions, prophecy, word of knowledge, word of wisdom, why isn't there a full-time agency advising the President of the United States? Or a full-time agency working to keep America safe? Which, you being an operator, you being a commanding general of SOCOM, you're obviously sending people to very, very dangerous missions. I mean, those guys don't walk out the door without their lives being on the line. And being in that situation yourself, I just loved it when we met. Next thing I know, you're in the spiritual intelligence mentorship, and you were just a guy. And then somehow we started, excuse me, I sent an email, or you sent an email or something, and I got wind that you were in the Army. And then you mentioned something, I think, about being a general. And I'm like, a general? We got a general that we're hanging out? Like, who is this guy? And so I remember I looked you up, and I was just like, holy cow, this guy's a Green Beret. He was head of SOCOM. This guy's a rock star. He's like a military, stars on his sleeve, scrambled eggs on his hat is what we used to call it in the Navy, right?
Yeah, we don't wear those.
No, you guys didn't wear those?
No, we just wear that green thing.
The green thing, yeah. So I'm like, man. And so, I started digging into your background, and I'm like, man, I need to call this guy. And so I called you.
Yeah, I didn't answer. You called, I didn't answer. I looked on my phone and it said Toledo, Ohio. I was like, yeah, I don't know anybody from Toledo, Ohio. And I thought, wait a second. That John Rodenbo guy said he was from Toledo, Ohio during that interview with Amanda Grace and Pastor Davis. Like, why would he be calling me? And so I just looked at it. I was like, no, I'm not going to answer it. And you called the second time. And so the second time I picked it up, I was like, John Rodenbo, is that you? It's like, and so the conversation took off.
Yeah, that was a fun conversation. That was interesting. And you kind of, I just kind of asked you, hey, so you were in the military, and what is this and what is that? And of course, I'm kind of, being a research intensive person as you are and I am, I knew everything you told me because I had already looked it up and looked up your bios and looked at your command profiles and all these things. And I'm just like digging into, who is this guy? And then I'm like, man, I need to talk to him. And we started talking, and man, we've been meeting together, having lunches, dinners, traveling, just working together ever since. And right away, I think you were probably the first person that we kind of brought in as somebody on the executive leadership team. Yeah, so we've been to a lot of places. We've been shooting together. We've been traveling together. We went up to Dallas together. We met some really interesting people.
Yeah, that was a fascinating group. That's a group that has been around for a couple of years, like 20. Didn't realize they even existed, but when they found out what we were doing, they were pretty intrigued to connect with us. And I think there's some.
And then Canton, of course, we met some really interesting people. I think I introduced you to Eric Trump.
You did.
Yeah, that was awesome, and I loved it because I just met him a few seconds before. He didn't know me, but I said Eric, hey, this is General Neo Tully, and he stopped dead in his tracks because he was walking with this, protection guys and stuff down the hall, and there was a whole lot of people that were just trying to say hi or say. He stopped dead in his tracks and he turned towards you and he was like, "Thank you so much for your service." And then he chatted with you for a few minutes, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I was very surprised that he took the time to talk to us. Very gracious man. Love what he and his family are doing for this nation. And later on, I introduced you to General Flynn.
Yes.
It was a good conversation.
Yeah, we've had some really interesting people that we've talked to, people and leaders, politicians, people running for office, people that we've interviewed, some people that we get the opportunity to work with. And boy, we've been through some battles too. Some of the stuff that's happened in the spiritual intelligence mentorship and the launch of the spiritual intelligence service, which you're the deputy director of.
There's a couple times during the last 2 years, well, a year, I guess it's only been a year, hasn't it? It seems like a lot longer than that.
Yeah.
But, there was some traveling that you guys were doing, and there were some people who had dreams that came in about the same time that coincided with your travel. And one of them got sent to me, and I started decoding. It was like, I got to call John about this. And it turned out that it was something to do with something that would hurt somebody on the senior leadership of this company.
Mm-hmm.
And the decode of it probably helped you to still be alive today.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it was you and somebody else.
Right.
It's just, it's amazing what God tells us and shows us through dreams. And when you actually decode dreams, because they're not all literal, most of them are figurative. The majority of them are figurative. You can't just take them at face value. But when they're decoded, some of the things that come out of it are just amazing, especially ones that are helpful in protecting us and providing actionable intelligence to organizations like ours and external to us, so they can function better and actually succeed at what they're doing and what they're meant to do.
Well, since early on in the spiritual intelligence mentorship, we call it SIM, and the SIS, which is the spiritual intelligence service, like it's almost seemed like since day one, we've had some pretty interesting people that have tried to gain access, tried to get involved, tried to pick off one or several of our team with drama and just all kinds of stuff that we've had to protect against. And you were the guy that actually wrote the security protocols, because again, when we were first starting, we were thinking, well, we're just kind of getting started with this dream interpretation thing, but we had in our hearts since day one to grow into what we are today, which is a full-fledged spiritual intelligence agency. We're an intelligence service known as the Spiritual Intelligence Service, and we provide actionable intelligence to commanders and heads of state primarily from dreams, but also from visions and prophetic words. And we now have quite a sizable staff that we've trained for 9 months, some as much as a year. And we're working on some really interesting things. But, it went back to that conversation that I had on His Glory with Amanda Grace and Dave Scarlett, where I was talking about spiritual intelligence, and you were reminiscing of, man, I was thinking about this back in the 80s. But didn't you have a situation where like your life was on the line and death was potentially imminent, that you were like, man, I wish we had better intel? Was there ever a time like that in your military service that you were like, man, I wish we really could see around the corner because we'd be more secure and potentially alive?
Yeah, there was several occasions, but one that in particular, I was living in Africa for a year, and I was kind of a hands-on commander, so I wanted to know what and that was another one of those commands where it's Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. And so I wanted to find out what these guys were doing as far as our support to another 4-letter Army agency that is stationed in Fort Bragg. But they were doing some work on the ground, and this particular aircraft was to collect intelligence for them, and so they could do their job better. I thought, well, I've got some guys going up, and there's room on the plane. I'd just like to go on a couple of these and help out and find out exactly what they're doing. And so part of that, you go through the pre-flight briefings, and amongst the briefings are the intel briefing, the threat briefing. It's like the intel officer got up and said, okay, this is a pretty benign environment. There's nothing that can reach up to where you guys are, so there's pretty much nothing to worry about. And there's no aircraft in the area that are going to be flying around trying to shoot you down. It's like, okay, that sounds good. I like not getting shot out of the air. That's good. Flying and remaining in the air is good.
Piece of cake, walk in the park.
This is going to be a walk in the park, sort of. So we take off about dusk, fly south, and fly. And we're about probably halfway through the mission. We've been, collecting intel over this one particular area. And I got done with whatever I was doing. I was sitting in the back of the plane. And all of a sudden, the plane just dives for the deck down and to the right. I mean, we're just like not vertical going straight down, but pretty darn close to it. And it's like, holy mackerel, I'm floating, I wasn't strapped down. So it's like, this is not natural.
Wow.
And so just before we started our descent, controlled descent, I might add, there was this kind of like a thump off the left wing. And so we're diving. So, and if I was in the Air Force, I'd be using both hands to show you how I was doing that. So guy comes to the back of the plane and he says, "Hey, somebody's shooting at us." It's like, what? There's nothing that's supposed to get up this high. I was briefed on that by an intel guy.
The intel guy said.
The intel guy was very not right. Anyway, so, that was one of those occasions where it would have been really helpful to know that this capability, we do as much as we can in the natural. I mean, we gather everything from multiple sources to get as good a picture as you can of the battlefield. So it's all the ints, OSINT, I'll go through them, a lot of acronyms, but open source intel, electronic, visual, mass, it's measurements, signals, all kinds of stuff. Multiple different intel sources. But the one that's missing is spiritual intelligence.
Mhm.
The last one that catches the things that those other natural means miss. And it would have been really helpful to know that the enemy that we were flying over had a capability to shoot at us, because at least we could have taken some precaution, maybe alter our route, done an extra check on certain pieces of equipment on the airplane that are helpful for avoiding detection. Because nobody was supposed to see us up there. We were blacked out. There was no reason that anybody knew we were there theoretically. But lo and behold, something blew up off our left wing. So, I mean, it would have been, I would have had a lot of splaining to do trying to walk out of wherever we were, back to wherever I was staying at that time. And yeah, because I was the senior guy on the plane. So I was the mission commander. I was in charge of the entire thing.
Wow.
Just by virtue of my rank, not because I was smarter than any of the people on the plane, but because of my rank. And so I would have had to lead the. It's not really escape. It's our walk back to wherever we had to go. So it would have been nice to have been able to know that thing was going to be shooting at us.
That wouldn't have been good. It would have been like shooting your way out, Black Hawk Down style, huh?
Yeah, and you're not equipped with a whole lot of stuff on that plane. My job, each person on the crew is responsible for not only their personal equipment, but another piece of equipment on the aircraft to help you survive once you do a controlled landing in a desert or someplace. My job was to carry the water bottle. This thing weighed like 300 pounds. It was huge. I never picked it up, but just looking at it, it's like, I don't know. I've carried a lot of weight in my day. Walking around the forests of the world. I mean, our rucksacks were like 100 pounds. This thing was just enormous, and it wasn't like anything that you could carry really well. It'd be like wrapping your arms around it, carrying it like that. So anyway, I was very happy that I didn't have to hump that thing through the desert.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow, that's crazy. So that was a harrowing night. You were thanking God when you made it landed safely after that one, huh?
Kiss the ground, I'll tell you. Yeah, it was. It just makes you thankful you're alive. Really. I mean, and when I get back to the United States, I realize that we live in paradise compared with the rest of the world. This is still, even though we have a lot of problems, this is still the greatest country in the world. Yeah, and I'm happy to be a citizen of it. I'll tell you.
Yeah. Wow. Well, did you have another pretty harrowing situation that had to do with a jump? I think I remember hearing this story.
Yes, I did. Again, what I said was, Satan tries to kill me right around times when I have spiritual breakthrough. Phantom Flight 103 was one of the first. The next time was in 1995. I was going to go. We had to jump on a weekend. At the end of the weekend, I was going to see a conference run by the Happy Hunters, Charles and Francis Hunter. They had a healing ministry, and I started praying for people, and well, it didn't start out real well. The first 3 people I prayed for died, and I'm kidding, they died, and I thought, maybe this isn't for me, and so I thought I'd go and see how the experts do it. And so on Sunday, I was supposed to go and see them. So the jump was on Saturday. It was in the middle of the night. and it was a beautiful night. It was crystal clear. But as soon as I boarded the plane, even before it, I was kind of like, something's just not right. And we haven't even taken off the ground. And I'm like, something's not right. So anyway, the way the plan was, get to altitude. We were jumping from about 12,000 feet. The release point is supposed to be like, let's say, a mile off the drop zone, off the airfield. So if we get out, you're going to see the airfield to the left. And then the wind will take you and we'll land on the airfield. Well, everything was happening really fast. And so we get to the ramp, I jump out, and we're right over the airfield. So I'm doing this minorly quick calculation, thinking if we're supposed to get out a mile this way, drift a mile this way, land on the drop zone on the airfield. Now that I'm starting out over the airfield, the drift is going to be a mile more to the left. And so as soon as we get out, open the parachute, and it's a starry night. It's gorgeous. It's kind of cool. It's in October 1995. And I'm looking around. It's like, okay, I can see the airfield. And I know I'm too low to make it. I don't have enough forward drive with the parachute to get me to the airfield. So I'm going to land somewhere below me. And so I look down and it's all black. And I'm thinking, well, it's either a field. And I had this horrible feeling that it was water. And I thought, well, it's either water. And just about the time I thought water, I see stars below me. The water was crystal clear, and I was seeing the reflection of the stars in the sky off the water. So I'm like, this is not good, because we hadn't prepared for a water landing. And water landings are a little bit different. You have to have things underneath your arms, and they theoretically keep you afloat. So I look to my left, and there's this. It's either a river or a road, so I head for it, and getting lower and lower and lower, and I land. I get really close to what I thought was the road, and I slam into this sewer pipe, this corrugated steel pipe. Kneecaps me, and so I'm like, I don't know if you've ever been kneecapped before, but you just want to pass out. Anyway, so I climb up. I land in the water. I'm about up to my waist. I climb out of the water, and I had the wherewithal to undo my leg straps, and so I'm laying on the ground trying to keep from passing out. Parachute lands in the water. And I'm like, I landed on land. Thank God I'm still alive. Then I hear this rushing noise. I'm thinking, that's kind of strange. Wonder what that rushing noise is from. And right about that time, I get yanked off the ground. My parachute gets sucked into the sewer pipe, and I'm heading for the water. And I know that if I get into the sewer pipe, I'm not coming out. I am dead. So, and out of nowhere, one of the guys in my unit grabs me around the waist. I don't even know where he came from. He was jumping with us. He must have landed up the road a little bit, but he came by to see if I was okay, I guess. Grabs me around the waist, and now we're both going to the water. And so we're digging our heels in, and I kind of scrunched my shoulders together enough, and finally the parachute came off my shoulders, fell in the water, and both of us were like, well, we're alive. That's a good thing. Anyway, they burned out a transmission trying to get the parachute out of the sewer pipe. So anyway, we went to the hospital that night, and the only thing that the doctors found was there was 2 snake bites it looked like snake bites on my kneecap, that it looked like, a snake had tried to bite me. It's like, is that the best you could do, Satan? Is just a couple bites on a kneecap? I mean,
wow.
Anyway, so yeah, that would have been a really helpful night to have known a little bit extra intel on what was going to happen, because I would have probably done some things differently. Yeah. So, and then I actually ended up at the conference, and Charles and Francis Hunter were wonderful people. Great teachers, great ministry. I understand their daughter's still doing it, but I've never had a chance to meet her.
I've met Joan. Yeah, that's awesome. Did you get your knee healed?
Oh yeah, that healed in about as soon as they touched it. That was kind of fun. Yeah, that was a good day.
That's awesome.
Yeah, when it was kind of like I walked in the place, and it was a church that we were going to, that they held it at. It wasn't a big conference center. It was one of the churches in Fredericksburg, Maryland, I think it was. And I had talked to the pastor and just told him I was coming, just to, because they wanted to know who was coming, and updated them as I was going along. I said, look, I had an accident. I'll be there. And so when I walked in the door, it's like everybody in the place turned around. It's like, he made it. So that was kind of funny.
Wow, that's really cool. I love the interaction between faith and like military service. Like you're literally in a jump, you get your life saved, like literally ripped out from the clutches of death, hurt your knee, end up the next day at a healing conference and get your knee healed. Like that's just incredible.
Yeah, that was an incredible weekend. I mean, just from start to finish. I mean, it was ludicrous. I mean, it's just, I know, you know, sometimes you think, oh, how life could turn out. It's like, yeah, that'll never happen, you know, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in that situation. It's like, literally, I mean, it's the kind of thing that having a dream ahead of time would be really helpful. And, but it's one of those story makers that is great after the fact. I mean, I'm telling you the story. I'm at least alive to tell you about the story. And it's pretty incredible. But I kind of had my first taste of the seer world, you know, back in high school. Senior year, I had an English course. I had this professor who he was an incredible man. He was the kind of guy, I think he swallowed a dictionary. If you didn't have like a 4-syllable word in every sentence, you'd get a letter docked off your grade. So anyway, we had this assignment to write a story. I thought, okay. He said, pick a topic. I don't care what you write on, just write on it. It was like, which for me was like, I wasn't a really good writer. My grades were really easy. Great content, punctuation horrible, C+. It's like, okay. So I went home and just sat at my desk waiting for inspiration on what to write on. And all of a sudden, I had this vision, and I started writing it. And it was a story about it was a vision about a Canadian bicyclist who was actually one of the best bicyclists in I guess it was the 80s, 70s, 80s. I mean, he won all kinds of medals, kind of put bicycling. I was a bicyclist and a speed skater when I was growing up. And so I actually had met this guy. So this vision kind of made sense because I had some familiarity with him. And so he had, the vision is that he's on a track. He was a track rider. He had, you know, a bouquet of flowers in his hand and all these medals around his neck. The Queen of England had given them to him because he had won, I don't know, something, Great Pan Am Games or something, whatever the Queen gives, you know, medals for. And he was just a fantastic man. And so it's just his glory days. That's what I'm writing about. And so the next scene was, I see him he's out on a training ride and he gets hit by a truck.
Whoa.
And he's paralyzed from the waist down and he's confined to a wheelchair. And so the last scene of the vision is he's wheeling his wheelchair back and forth in front of a trophy case, just remembering his glory days, you know, and knowing that he'll never be able to ride again. And so that was the end of the vision, and that was the end of my paper. And I thought, well, that's kind of a weird ending. You know, usually it's like, give me a good ending or something different than. It was kind of weird. So turned in the paper, and yeah, I think I got a C+ on it. So this was in 1979, 1984. I get a call from my dad, and he says, "Hey Neil, you remember that paper you wrote in high school?" He said, "I'm reading the Buffalo Evening News, and Jocelyn Lavelle got hit by a truck during a training ride. He's paralyzed from the waist down."
Wow. Was that the guy you wrote about?
Yep.
Wow, that is crazy.
Yeah, I thought, wow, I had no grid for what visions were, you know, where they came from. I had no idea. But to have written about it, it kind of meddled with my brain. It was like, did I cause this because I wrote about it, or was it from God? So, you know, after years and years and finally linking up with you, I've kind of gotten a little better handle on where visions come from, where dreams come from, where prophecy comes from. You know, if you had a dream, how do you know it's from God? You had a dream.
Yeah.
Because all dreams come from God. So gave me a little comfort in knowing that he's in charge. Anyway, so yeah, it was an interesting start, but I didn't write a whole lot after that. Maybe
you wrote something bad had come true.
Yeah, I mean, that thought had gone through my mind. So, you know, it wasn't until we started, actually, it's kind of funny, in November 2020, so that would have been about 5 months before we met. I woke up. I had this dream, and I really didn't dream a whole lot before the end of November in 2020. And it was this really long. It was like a movie that went on. It seemed to go on forever. It didn't, but it seemed really long. And so I woke up, and the Lord says, "Write it down." I was like, "What?" He said, "Write it down." I said, "No, it's going to take too long. Besides, I have devotions to do, and that would take my time away from you, right?"
Wow.
He didn't buy it. He said, "No, write it down." It's like, "Fine, I'll write it down." So, I mean, it was this amazing, it was an amazing dream. So anyway, the point was that was when I started writing them down, and the dreams kind of trickled until about Easter of last year.
Mm.
Then it was like one every night. And I've got like, I don't know, 180 pages worth of dreams right now that I got to go through. I haven't decoded all of them, but it's just, it's odd if I go through a night that I don't dream. So I went from virtually nothing to dreaming every night. And the things that he tells me, that shows me in these things are, dreams of foretelling, warnings, all kinds of stuff. But everyone's different. It's just a fascinating journey, I'll tell you. So thank you for calling me twice that day.
Well, it's such a joy to have you as part of our, the spiritual intelligence service. And we've been through some pretty interesting things. I mean, we've done a couple of decodes, you and I together, where we've looked at, fiery car crashes or danger or, people getting shot or things, and even mass casualties at certain conferences where we've had dreams come in. I don't think they were yours or mine, but they were about, a mass shooting,
Yep.
a live shooter event, and we've had to discern, okay, is this real? Is this legit? There's going to be some pretty important political leaders there at these things, and what do we do and how do we act? And of course, in some cases, we've known some of the people that work security, and so we've been able to put things in the hands of people and have some conversations. But on the journey so far, being part of the spiritual intelligence service, what is like one memory that really sticks out to you as being like a moment where it was, I know for me, when we kind of dipped our toe into this, it was with the belief that God had already shown me some things related to the 2020 election and related to some stuff, but a lot of it was just kind of me and my personal time decoding dreams with God. And so I kind of launched this whole thing in faith. And then there were some things where it's like, this works. Like, this works as its own intelligence discipline where we can get actionable intelligence that we can put in the hands of other people that can help them govern nations or move people out of harm's way, or military commanders that we've talked to, people in different agencies of the government, political leaders running, whether it's heads of state or people working in international sectors or people working in our own government. We've had the opportunity to brief some really, really interesting people. But what was like the moment that you were like, man, this thing really works?
I don't know if there was a single time, but I know that some of the dreams that we were doing during the second sim course just seemed to be pointing to things that were actionable and real. There was one, we had a lady who was running for office in a foreign country, and she had a dream, and I think that's probably the first one that spanned the borders of the United States. Like, this applies internationally, not just nationally. I mean, God doesn't just care about the United States; He cares about how the whole globe is put together in the universe. Quite frankly, because He made it. So it was probably that dream that pointed me towards helping people out by decoding their dreams and having it really have actionable intelligence for them to alter what they were doing in order to be more aligned with God's will and what God's purpose is for their life. And also to kind of comfort them, like that, knowing that they're on the right direction, they're going on the right track, and that they can kind of see at least a little bit into the future as to what's going to come before them. And I think, that particular dream, being specifically vague, probably did it for me. But then there was just dreams that went around the class, the student class, And I just started decoding, and it was like things just popped. It was just like symbols started to make sense, and the whole overall picture, I could see it a little bit easier as the more I did it. And it's not so much when I interpreted it, but it was the reaction that the people who I was giving it to was like, this, it's like, you're reading my mail. It's like, get out of my head, because you're a little too, the dream, this is God talking to these people. He's the one who wants to give them this information. So when it gets really specific, they're like, holy mackerel, I've never heard anything like this before, but it resonated with them as being true. And I think that was the biggest effect on me, was to see the reaction of other people. I mean, you've interpreted dreams for, maybe one or two people before. Tell me about some of the reactions that they've had on some of the unusual dreams that they've given you.
Well, there's a couple that really come to mind that have been pretty incredible. There was one that's just a well-known prophetic voice all throughout the United States, but internationally as well. And his wife had a dream, and it was the same dream 3 times in one night. And, God immediately brought me back to Genesis 41, the 2 dreams of Pharaoh. And he said the dreams are one and the same, which means the matter is firmly decided and it will happen soon. And so I interpreted the dream, and I said, here's what it means. And because you had it 3 times in one night, what I'm hearing from the Holy Spirit is it's either going to happen like in the next 24 to 48 hours, or it's already happened.
Wow.
There's a pause on the line, and I'm like, hello, did I lose you? And when we get into actionable intelligence, it's not just like, oh, God bless you, and oh, things are going to shift. And it's like, this day, this time, this type of thing is going to happen with this type of person in this way. It's very specific, right? And man, they had this dream 3 times in one night. And what happened was it was a really interesting situation, particularly because there was a lot of detail in the description of the way that I described the actionable intelligence. But because they had it 3 times, I said, look, this either is going to happen like 24 hours or it already happened. And so they were like not talking at all. And I said, hello, are you guys there? And they said, yeah, John, exactly what you described happened 2 days ago. And I was like, really? They said, yeah, you said this and this and this and this and this. And exactly that scenario happened. And I said, well, if that happened, then that means that this and this happens, because it was very specific. Well, here's what you should do. Kind of like, the dreams of Pharaoh, right? I'll let Pharaoh appoint a man. And so he gave him a strategy. And I said, well, here's what you should do. And so that was really cool. There were other times, and this doesn't happen a lot, Neil, but there's sometimes when somebody has a dream and you're interpreting a dream, and the dream is immediately proven true. And there was one that was, and I love this story because it was a financial story. And the thing I like about financial stories is they involve numbers. So it's not like, oh, I hope the weather warms up. It's like the weather's going to change 10 degrees, and it's what I call go, no-go intel. Yep. You're either right or you're wrong. There's no room for error because you didn't leave yourself a wide margin. And so I was at an event. I had been invited to the Modern Prophetic Symposium, actually. And there was just a bunch of prophetic leaders there, and I brought my dream team, and we were, when they called up the prophetic team, they just said, hey, John and his team is a dream interpretation team. If you want a dream interpreted, come up. And so as happens, a guy comes up and says, hey, I had a dream. And I said, great, tell me your dream. And so he says, well, I had this dream that I was at an airport and I was trying to fly out and I was late and I was running. And some United Airlines stewardess, flight attendant, stops me and says, you're not going to make your flight, but here's $1,000 voucher. And the guy's like, well, no, I got to make my flight. My partner's on a plane. I got to run. She said, you're not going to make your flight, but it's okay. Here's $1,000 voucher. And he's like, well, thanks for the voucher, but I'm running. And so he runs. And right when he gets to the gate, there's 2 Asian ladies, this is what he said, and 2 wooden doors, and they shut the wooden doors, preventing him from, entering the gate and getting on the plane, and he misses his flight. Now, this was January 2020. So the only thing we knew about coronavirus was it was that crazy thing in Wuhan.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have a grid for it. The first official case in America was January 20th of 2020. And so nobody really had a grid other than the news that we were seeing coming out of Asia was kind of disturbing. And we're like, I don't know if that's really going to land here or not or whatever. But so without having, the 2020 kind of lens as everything that we've gone through as a nation and as a world and, just everything that's been part of the experience of the last 2 years, we didn't have that at all. And so here's what I told the guy. I said, when you said Asian ladies, I heard quarantine, which, we've heard that word before and seen it in movies, but when does it ever really apply to people en masse, right? And I said, and when you said wooden doors, I heard the bamboo curtain. I said, I'm like, God, I don't even know your name. Like, you just told me your dream, like 20 seconds long. But the only thing I know about you is I feel like, and this is what I feel like I was saying, is you're trying to do business in China right now and the door's closed. And the guy lights up and he's like, oh my gosh, that's absolutely amazing. I'm raising, $3-5 million for this business I'm in. And I had $1 million committed soft, which just means they have a verbal commitment from an investor in China.
Mm-hmm.
Ever since this crazy thing in Wuhan started, the guy's ghosted me. I can't even get him on the phone. And I said, the bamboo curtain's closed. And he's like, okay, well, that's great. That's intelligence. It's information. But it's not necessarily actionable intelligence, because actionable intelligence, it declares like the news, like 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine, but then it gives you a strategy. Now, here's what you should do. And so the fact that the dream was immediately proven true was like exciting enough for me. But then this happens. God says, tell them about the 10,000-fold increase in Psalms. There's like one obscure verse in Psalms where it talks about your flocks and your herds will increase 10,000 times or 10,000-fold. Just like, wow. And so I said, I just really feel by the Spirit of the Lord that He wants me to tell you you're going to have a 10,000 times or a 10,000-fold increase on whatever it is you're doing. So God wants you to think demonstratively bigger than you're thinking now. You got to think way bigger. And he's like, okay. By the way, what's your name? He gives me his name and gives me his card and says, can I get your information? I'd like to stay in touch. And I'm like, sure. And this was just a line of 20 people that got their dream interpreted that day. It was, it's kind of like live dreams, except when you have people waiting in line, it's typically shorter than, we don't do 10 or 15 minutes with one person. It's kind of like a 3 or a 5 minute touch. And then they're like, okay, thanks. And then they're on to the next. Yeah. Right. So, I remembered the dream sort of, because of the fact that it was immediately proven true. But a week later, I get a phone call, and this guy's just freaking out on the phone. Like, oh my gosh, you need to be in the C-suite of my company. I need you on my board. I need you to work for me. Can you consult with me? And I'm like, dude, I met you once for 5 minutes. Like, what's going on? I called him out. What's going on? And he said, do you remember that dream? And I'm like, yeah, the Asian ladies and the bamboo curtain. And he said, yeah. He said, do you remember what you told me? And I said, yeah. I said, God said to think demonstratively bigger, that He wanted to give you 10,000 times what you were thinking now. He goes, John, a week later, I'm walking into a meeting at a hedge fund. It's a $10 billion hedge fund. And I'm walking into this meeting and I'm just like, God, I just was trying to raise a couple of $1 million. And right as my hand hit the door to open it, God reminded me, think demonstratively bigger than you're thinking now. And so I go into this boardroom, instead of going up to present, I sit down at the boardroom table and I look around and they're like, what are you doing? Like, are you going to present and ask for money or not? And he goes, what if I bought you guys out? And they're like, say what? What he didn't know is one of the largest financial mergers in like world history. A massive financial company in New York was being bought or looking at being acquired or acquisition style from one of the largest financial firms in London. And the problem with the merger was this particular hedge fund, Neil, because it was a $10 billion hedge fund, but it was bleeding capital because it was top heavy. They had too many managers in the hedge fund and they didn't know what to do about it. They can't put it up for sale because it could blow the merger. They want to sell it, but they can't advertise it. And this guy walks in out of nowhere, sits down at the table and says, what if I bought you out? And now it's a portfolio of other people's stocks and bonds. And really what they do is they manage it and you get a fee for management and all of that. And so he was looking at acquiring it for like 10 million bucks. And I said, did you say $10 million? And he said, yeah. I said, in the dream, didn't you get $1,000 voucher from the United airline flight attendant? He said, yeah. I said, $1,000 times 10,000 is 10 million.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I said, and didn't you say that this guy was trying to raise $1 million from China? He said, yeah. And I said, 10,000 times a million is 10 billion. Exactly. So literally in a week, the numbers turned out to the penny exactly 10,000 times the numbers we were working with.
That's incredible. That's absolutely amazing.
That's when you can't make this stuff up. Like, this is just too crazy.
Yeah, and it's been that way since we started. I mean, it's been like we left the gate and we've been running at full speed since then.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. By the way, if you're interested in the spiritual intelligence mentorship, this is where you can get some information on it. Neil and our bios are there, and we also have dreamlifedecoded.com, which we talk a lot about the dream stuff, but the spiritual intelligence side, which is kind of Neil and my jam, being ex-military and working at Intel and doing different things. And we just love the opportunity to work with people that are hungry for actionable information. So what would you say as far as somebody that might be interested, what kind of people would you like to see, because you're deputy director, would you like to see in the spiritual intelligence service, and what kind of people do you think would maybe want to apply or get involved with the spiritual intelligence mentorship, Neil?
Yeah, it really is runs the gamut. I mean, doesn't matter whether you're male or female, young or old. I mean, we have a lot of people in the agency right now that are older. We have younger people who they all have kind of the same category. They can hear from God. The only criteria really we need in order to be able to decode dreams and visions and prophecies is your ability to hear from God. And if you can hear what the Holy Spirit is saying, you can decode anything. And so it kind of doesn't matter what your skill set is. From what I've seen, we talked about this on the live dreams when we were doing war dreams. I think I made a comment that I'd be really good at these war dreams because of my background. And that's sort of true. I can give a little insight that would probably add to the depth of what's being talked about, but not necessarily change the decode significantly. It would give a little insight. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. But if any walk of life, we have every single part of our society needs intel on what they're doing, from financial, from the food industry, from banking industry, shipping, logistics, anything that moves the country and keeps it safe, especially the military. I mean, it'd be interesting to have more military folks, only because I have that background, but we need people from the political world, because let's face it, the military works for civil authority. So, when you hit the 4-star level, you're not at the top. You're now at the floor for the political world. The civilians run the military. And so we need to be able to give good advice to those people. And if you're giving military advice to civilians, you need to know how to do it. And dreams and visions and prophecies are one way to fill the gap. When you do a gap analysis, you're looking for places that you don't have information. And the civilian intel agencies provide up to a certain degree. You can't get rid of them. They are absolutely essential to the intel world. But the piece that we provide is the spiritual intelligence. It's intelligence from a righteous source that sees behind corners, sees into the future, and explains the past, and gives actionable intelligence as to what to do. So, without us, you've got a gap in your intelligence. And the whole reason this whole organization was stood up was to be able to give righteous intelligence to leaders of the world, specifically our nation, at least for right now, but ultimately to kings and rulers around the world. Because even if you're a despot in some country and you're getting advice from God, probably a good thing.
Yep. Imagine the wars that could be stopped or prevented if there were at least somebody that they trusted that had a prophetic bend or could hear from God or could hear from heaven, whispering in their ear, like the kings of old, like Nebuchadnezzar, like Pharaoh, like even even Esther's husband, and even Abimelech. I mean, saved their entire nation because the king had sinned, and he got the opportunity to make it right because God appeared in a dream.
Yeah, with Pharaoh and Joseph, the first thing Pharaoh did was call the wise guys. And the wisest of the wise guys was the astronomer, because he could see the times. You look at the sky and see the times and the epochs of what's going on and predict what's going to happen. And so he was the smartest guy in the room, really. But even when Pharaoh gave him his dream, he couldn't decode it. And it was the same with Nebuchadnezzar when he had a very disturbing dream. Matter of fact, it was so disturbing he didn't even remember it, or he wouldn't tell him what it was. And his astronomer looked at him and said, nobody's ever asked people like us to tell both what the dream is and its interpretation. He said, there's no way we can do it. But Daniel got wind of it and he said, I can do it. So there's the Natural Intelligence Organization at the time was the magicians, the soothsayers, the seers, the astronomers. That's the intel organizations of old. That's the CIA, the FBI, the DIA, and figure out another agency. But Daniel provided the spiritual and righteous source to get both the actual dream, what the dream was, and its interpretation, and what to do with it. Because God gives both of them. He gives the dreams and the interpretation.
Yeah, wow. I love that. We've talked about, and I still want to do it at some point. Neil and I are starting to do some things together. This is kind of the first dip our toe in the water, is the idea of dreams of war. We've done this once, we're going to do it again. And it's, people that are having dreams of war, national world level threats, nuclear bombs, terrorist activities. There's a lot of people during troubled times, and scripture even says when the mind is troubled, dreams come. And so we know that God speaks during troubled times, and with war happening and things, uneasiness and nations positioning and different things, whether it's, Iran attacking Israel, or whether it's Russia and Ukraine thing that's happening, or it's the rumblings of things in Asia. Like it's kind of a very unsettling time for a lot of people. And unfortunately, we cannot trust far and away the mainstream media and even a lot of the alternative media. And so it's like, well, who can you trust? And so one of the things that we've done is we've pressed into God and said, tell us the truth. Tell us the truth of the world. Tell us what's going on, current events, how do we position ourselves, and with the responsibility that we have, because we've kind of turned our ears on to be able to look from dreams from other sources, not just inside our own organization, but we find other prophetic or known dreamer voices that are out there, and we call it harvesting their dreams, bringing their dreams in and putting them in a dossier. We may have 5 dreams, but somebody else may have another dream that provides a piece. And this kind of came out of the discussion that I had with the Lord after the election of 2020, where the prophetic was kind of all over the map. There were people saying this was going to happen, that was going to happen. People were retracting what they said, apologizing. People were quitting the ministry. There was just all kinds of chaos that was going on. And I'm like, God is not confused. In fact, in the dream world, the answer never changed. Not one time did it veer off from this way to this way to this way to this way. And so what we know is we just don't have all the information. But I was like, God, how do we get more information? And he really spoke to me about the idea of centralizing intelligence, which is why we've studied like the formation of the Central Intelligence Agency, and while Bill Donovan, the head of the OSS, coming out of World War II, and putting in a proposal to Truman that launched the Central Intelligence Group in 1946, and then in 1947, with the signing of the National Security Act, that launched the Central Intelligence Agency. The whole idea was to centralize intelligence during a time of peace, not during a time of war, where we could keep tabs on the world, because we need to know in the State Department and the Justice Department and in the military what's happening, and kind of keep our ears up and hear what is going on. And I'm like, we have that in the prophetic, but so many times we just have a prophet get up and say one thing without any regard to 5 other people that have had a dream about the same topic. And of course, that may not be their calling. They're called to deliver the message that God is giving them. But we're looking around and we're like, who's centralizing this information? Not just centralizing, but analyzing. Because it's one thing to take a bunch of dreams and prophetic words and put it in one location. And it's another thing to have a seasoned group of governmental level trained dream interpreters, people that could literally walk into the White House and interpret the dream of a president. They're that good. And put them with a group of people and say, let's look at Russia, Ukraine. Let's look at a series of dreams that are coming about Russia, Ukraine. Let's analyze 10 dreams, not one dream, together using the same method Joseph used. And let's put a dossier together. God, what are you saying about this topic? And the information that we're finding out is mind-blowing. Like, it's absolutely incredible. And a lot of this stuff, man, I tell you what, when we're in our briefings where we have the people that are working with us from these teams are briefing Neil and I and the executive leaders and saying, here's what's happening. I'll tell you what, in some of those dreams, it's like, man, this stuff is beyond our pay grade. Like, we're talking about what heads of state and nations are doing, is God is saying, this is their motive, and this is what's happening, and this is what's going to happen next. And so it's really incredible intelligence for heads of state and commanders, which is what we feel called to do.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that whole decode that we've been doing with the different dossiers. You know, it's amazing how when you pick out, the Lord leads you to pick out certain dreams, how they dovetail together. And it's like, you know, a single dream, you've said before, is like a sticky note. So you decode one and you've got kind of like a point on the map. You decode 5 dreams, you know, the picture gets a little clearer. Then you get 300 dreams, which we haven't gotten that, but you get a mural, you know, you get a really clear picture of it. And they all, you know, provide a little bit more detail to the picture. And the more detail you get, the better information and intelligence that we can give to leaders of this world, the better that they have, the more they have to make decisions in a good way, you know, in a clear, more godly way. And that's our goal, to serve them.
Yeah, absolutely. We want our people running nations and running armies and with their fingers on nuclear buttons to have the best intelligence possible. And that's one of the things that I love about spiritual intelligence is it comes, particularly dreams, they come from a pure stream. Like, we had to settle the issue a long time ago. Do dreams come from God, or is there a mixture? Can it be devil and demons and this and that? And through our extensive study of every single verse in the Bible and every single dream, and there's a lot of people that teach differently. But what we've found and what we've learned is that all dreams they come from God. Like, the enemy doesn't have the capability or the technology to plant images into your head while you sleep at night. And if that's the case, which it is, and if you're not there, that's okay. It took me 2 years to get there. And I was the one that God initially gave the revelation to. And I had to study and look at everything in Scripture. And then I had to ask people, tell me your worst nightmare for 2 years. I spent 2 years doing nothing but interpreting nightmares. You know, and I realized there was never one that I was like, yeah, that's a demonic dream, just rebuke it. And I had to go down that path, probably 1, because I'm a little hard-headed, but 2, because I needed to be convinced of the source of our intel. And so now I can have full confidence when I approach somebody that is in a position to literally advise heads of state or heads of state themselves or commanders of armies or in the national security infrastructure of our nation. And I can say confidently, this came from a legitimate source, and this is what we know this to mean, and here's what you should do. And that's a powerful position to be in, and it's incredible because we've seen things that have happened on a national scale that we predicted months and months in advance, which we don't have time to go into tonight, but I'd love to have another interview with you, Neil, where we go into a little bit more detail. And one of the things that we've talked about is doing a call it like the director and the general, you know, do a Bible study related, or even just another kind of show where we bring on other generals or heads of state and we talk to people and people can see kind of live action what it looks like. But Neil and I started doing live dream interpretation together, particularly with the dreams of war. But it's on our heart to do a Bible study at some point where we go through the Bible and we look at, with my background in intel and his background in warfighting and special ops, look at like Gideon, look at like different battles, Jehoshaphat, different battles where God gave spiritual intelligence, whether it was through a prophet or a dream or whatever, where a strategy was released, and then talk about, like in the case of Gideon, where they were coming in from an elevated position with a shock and awe campaign and blah, blah, blah. And we can hear from a general, a war fighter with 30 years experience in the Army, how brilliant the strategies that God gave were, and Jericho and everything, and also the spiritual intelligence and the strategy side that came into play and what that looks like. And I think examining scripture from the backgrounds, I spent 15 or 20 years or so doing finance and strategy for companies. And so coming in as a strategist and you coming in as a general and a war fighter and somebody, both an operator and somebody that sent men into battle and commanded forces. It's just a really interesting juxtaposition to look at scripture in that regard and to see how the things that God gave as strategies were actionable intel that literally saved hundreds of thousands of lives and routed foreign armies.
Yeah, and probably one of the better works that you've done a lot of them, to explain the whole where do dreams come from, is you created the 21 Dreams Through the Bible series. You go through each dream in the Bible that is talked about. And it really, if you listen closely, for all the soul dreams and the demonic dreams, you'll find out that there aren't any. But it really opened my eyes as to how to interpret dreams and where they come from, and some of the, how God talks to us. It debunks a lot of the common misconceptions about what dreams are and where they come from. So, that series, you're redoing it, but it's on YouTube if anybody's interested in doing it. It's called 21 Dreams Through the Bible with John Rittenbow. So,
well, and yeah, we're in the process of redoing that series, and it's going to be a little bit more succinct, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But if you doubt in any way, by the way, if you're hearing this is the first time you've ever heard that dreams come from God, and you're just like, what? That's where I was. And that's not what we came on the show to talk about today, but do this. Write your dreams down. Just write them down. And if they're from a nefarious source, you can always cross them out later. But capture the information, because what if all dreams come from God? We're convinced. Finance, president, CEO, strategist, gave up everything I was doing to do this full time, but launched the Spiritual Intelligence Service. A 30-year Green Beret, rocket scientist, special operations commanding general is working on this full time. Like, we have probably a little bit of credibility in the fields that we've worked in. And I'm telling you, we are 100% convinced about the efficacy of spiritual intelligence, why it works. And we could tell you stories. Some we can't tell you because they're literally classified. There's been national security threat assessment level information that we've gotten in that we've had to put in the hands of other people that could act on it, and we believe have saved lives. And we certainly know others that are like us. There's not a lot, but there's a few well-placed people in certain parts of the national security infrastructure who believe in the prophetic. And we've heard some stories that, again, unfortunately, we can't share about how lives have been saved. And it's absolutely incredible. When you do your job in intel, well, nobody knows. And so it's not the kind of thing that we can get out there and say this is going to happen and that's going to happen, but it is the kind of thing that, wouldn't you want to know? Wouldn't you sleep a little better at night knowing that the commanders and the generals of the U.S. military infrastructure and the heads of state, particularly the executive branch, even Congress, people that are making decisions about what happens in our nation, everything from policy to foreign relations to economics, and certainly, military action. Wouldn't you sleep better knowing that those people were hearing from God and had people that could share with them, this is what the Lord is saying, and now here's what you should do. And so if you feel any inkling, any interest, like Neil did, because he's been dreaming about it since the 1980s, like I did when I had that first conversation where we asked the central question, and you want to join us, come and be a part. Go to spiritualintel.com. But I tell you what, it's been a pleasure and it's been a joy having you on, interviewing you for Dream Talks, Neil. It's been great being able to work with you, and just the breadth of experience, the wisdom, the leadership that you have has been just a massive, massive upgrade in our organization. And I'm so glad that we have some amazing people that we work with. But man, I just love the fact of what you carry and who you are and what God's kind of placed on you as a mantle. It's just a joy to work with you.
Well, thank you, John, for having confidence in me for you to listen to the Lord and, bring me on this team, because you're the one who's leading it, and your leadership in this organization is key to forming it and moving it along. And I really appreciate your sensitivity to the Spirit and listening to him and doing exactly what he tells you to. So it's been a pleasure tonight, and I really look forward to doing this again. And I'll talk to you in the morning probably about something else that we're doing tomorrow.
Yep. Wow. Awesome. Well, thanks for being on. And like you said, we'll talk to you soon. Love to have Neil on again. By the way, if this is the first Dream Talks you've seen, we have several on Dream Life Decoded at YouTube. And we replay these. These are also on His Glory. You can see them usually Friday night at 8:30 p.m. on His Glory TV. Again, Neil and I together will be doing Dreams of War soon, where if people have dreams, and we do a live dream interpretation every Tuesday. I think this next coming week we're going to do Dreams of War, and we're going to begin to do more and more together. But in particular, it's just so fun to have his experience while we talk about things that affect our national security and the current events of what's going on in the world. Thanks again for joining us for Dream Talks, and we will see you next time.
This morning I had a dream about a vacation and a sunken key. I could see and smell the ocean, and as I was floating on the water, I felt a warm presence. There was a man in scuba gear who beckoned me to follow him. He led me to a key laying on the ocean floor, and then when we were on the shore, he gave it to me to keep. Then the scene changed and I found myself in a tent, and the brand name really stood out to me, Ripen Tents. As it grew dark, the stars started swirling, and I saw a neon yellow sign in the sky that said, "Revive All." I woke up so moved by God's presence that I had to write down my dream. Then I typed out the key symbols, the way I learned in the dreams course. I asked the Holy Spirit to help me interpret them, and He opened my eyes to the meaning of the dream. Jesus was showing me that the key to unlocking His mysteries is found by making Him my highest priority. I need to dive deep and recommit to time with Him, including practicing the gifts He's given me. He's calling me to the secret place, to camp out with Him, and to learn to trust Him on this journey without being afraid of where He might take me. I'm amazed at the way God uses dreams to speak to me.